Hi, I'm Kevin McAdams. I live in Central Texas, just south of Austin. Over the course of my life so far, I've been a broadcaster, a live streamer, producer, soldier, retail manager, teacher, and most importantly, husband. And for a couple of years, I was this guy who built mountains out of candy boxes at Walmart for the purpose of driving holiday sales and sending dentist kits to college. Now, for the third time, I'm attempting to be a podcaster. I started producing live streams of high school sports in 2003, long before the word live stream showed up in Webster's dictionary or even the Urban Dictionary. Podcasts were out there, but you really needed an iPod to get them. And that was something that was way outside the budget of this particular member of the broadcasting proletariat. They called what we did internet radio, although we preferred the term internet broadcasting because somehow it sounded more legitimate. All our games were live with archives available for replay. It was a really slow start since nobody really knew what this thing we were pioneering was or if it would even last, but we slowly built an audience and now there are thousands of people doing it. In 2006, my partner Chuck Licata, with whom I co-founded KMAX Sports in 2003, we decided we needed a studio for production and to see if we could make any money doing talk shows. Spoiler alert, we did not, in fact, make any money. In fact, we lost quite a bit. But that was a really educational experience. Chuck rented us an office space in this kind of sketchy building. I jokingly referred to the address as the corner of ghetto and industrial. An exaggeration, perhaps, but not really too far off either. We found an actual studio desk abandoned in one of the many empty offices, and we blatantly stole it. I had never done such a thing in my life, and the act caused me some anxiety. We weren't even sneaky about it, but nobody ever came looking for it, so I guess it was meant to be a sign from above that we were doing something good. We raided Chuck's garage for an old dining room table, which, with the addition of a few freshly drilled holes and 4 cheap, flexible microphone stands, made an excellent talk radio table. The matching chairs from the set completed our little talk radio studio. Then I took a small personal loan, which I used to outfit the studio with the least expensive production gear that would still do the job. It was, in fact, the best studio $1,400 could buy. We named it Studio 19 after Chuck's lucky number and started a new website, kmactalk.com. We ran about a half a dozen different shows out of there, but I honestly can't tell you how many people ever listened to them. I know there were some. The Paco and Lefty show had a small but dedicated audience. And no wonder. It was a really fun ride through current events and sports featuring our friends John Molise, Paco, Juan, Ryan McKinley. Then there was Sarge Mason, who we knew from our days of broadcasting races from the old Thunderhill Raceway down in Kyle. He hosted a racing-themed show with a dedicated audience. Merle Bertrand was a filmmaker who once produced a documentary on Thunderhill, and he hosted a show dedicated to movies. He knew a lot of artists from the local film community and always had the best guests on. Then there was Trey Elling, a producer I knew from Clear Channel, where I worked at the time. Trey, well, I don't remember exactly what he talked about in detail. He bristled a little when I called his show conspiracy-laden in a magazine interview, but in his FU email to everyone at Clear Channel, a legendary email that I really wish a copy or two existed to this day, because, man, it was legendary. But in that FU email, on the day he quit, he specifically stated that Oswald did not, in fact, kill Kennedy. So take what you will from that. There were also a few that, you know what, I really don't care to remember them. So let's just leave them forgotten. Then there was my show, What I Say It Is. It was called that because I'd be stating my opinion on everything, and at the end of that episode, that would be the final word. I had a supporting cast. The aforementioned Ryan McKinley, Jason Duda, another young man named Travis Betts. It was a chaotic mashup and a blatant ripoff of several local morning shows I'd admired over the years. It was the most fun I'd ever had on a mic. I think about 5 people listened, maybe only 2 on a regular basis, but after all the years I'd spent as a small town DJ, relegated to traffic reporting, and when I finally made it to a major market, It was just such a rush to finally get to be the on-air personality I'd always wanted to be, on my terms, in my place. It was truly an amazing show, or so I'm told today by people who enjoyed it back in the day. I honestly believe it could make money given the right outlet and promotion. I mean, that wasn't really important to me at the time. I was just having fun at a time when there really wasn't very much fun in my life. The ride came to an end in 2008 when we just couldn't afford the studio anymore. And we really had to get in there and get our gear out before the landlord could lock us out. Thus ended Studio 19, a tiny little talk radio outlet, known by very few, but loved by all of them. So we fast forward to 2020. I found myself completely isolated due to COVID shutting down my business and me being in a high-risk comorbidity group. I was sitting in my own home studio, Studio 42, named after my lucky number, this very room I'm sitting in now. I was depressed, aimless, despondent. I needed some sort of outlet, so I decided to bring back What I Say It Is. But this time it was really just me expressing my feelings. I didn't really like the finished product. I think it was my dad who said, "That's okay, but it's really just you bitching about things." And when I listened back, I heard it. I knew with absolute certainty that nobody really wanted to hear this. Hell, I didn't want to hear it. Now it's 2022. My business has recovered, although like many in these tough times, I have to work side hustles, but that's okay because the McAdams company started out as a side hustle. When I got back into high school football live streaming in 2019, I started talking to a lot of my friends and colleagues from the old days, although, man, it feels really weird to me to refer to 2007 as the old days. But I realized we all had tons of amazing stories to tell. And so I decided to tell them. So here it is, the third incarnation of What I Say It Is. I'm reusing that name for a couple of reasons. One, I own it. And two, my search of the Googles and the Bing thingy and the major podcast platforms show me that nobody else is using the name. And because I really don't know what this show is, or it will be, I struggled for a long time trying to decide what it would be about. Should it be news, sports, politics, my favorite sci-fi? In fact, for years, I talked about all these to my wife, Lisa. And when a Facebook friend posted that they were thinking about starting one, I replied that I had 6 in development hell. Lisa's reply was, only 6? So each episode will be What I Say It Is. And I'll talk to whoever I talk to on that episode about whatever I want. If you're still listening at this point, thank you. And let's go. I promise you all the intros won't be this long, but it is what I say it is. And I know I said I'd be talking to friends and colleagues from the old days, but my first guest for my first episode is somebody I've met relatively recently. She's Kierstin Bible, and you'll hear all of her qualifications, etc., in the conversation. But most importantly, she's been Lisa's BFF for over 30 years and is really a member of our extended family. Whenever we're all together, she and I wind up talking about business, performance, music, and most importantly, the process of self-reinvention, which we've both done several times. And we always say, this should be a podcast. Well, now it is. Okay, I can hear you.
I'm flopped on the couch, feeling very comfy. And I have Kleenex to catch the nose.
Let's see.
And crack the bottle of water.
I do that, I don't. Can you talk for me real quick?
Sure, I can always talk. That's one of my talents. Lots and lots of talking.
Lots and lots of talking.
I'm really, really good at it.
Okay, good. Good volume level. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just jump right into this. After I
cleanse the palate.
Well, wash the pizza meat down past the false teeth.
There you go.
So I was, Well, when I decided to do this, I was wondering who I would talk to, on this first episode, and I immediately thought of my very first guest. Oh, maybe not immediately, but you were right up at the top of the list. I'd like to introduce a woman who is basically a family member. Has been my wife Lisa's best friend for what is it, almost 30 years now.
How old am I? It's more than 30 years.
More than 30 years. Wow.
34 years? 34?
But every time we get together, we talk about the process of reinvention because it's something we've both been through a lot. And we have these long conversations, and I keep thinking this ought to be a podcast. So here we are. I want to introduce Dr. Kierstin Bible. She's a musician, a singer, a teacher, an instructional designer, a heck of a gardener, and probably a half dozen other things I don't know about. Kierstin, welcome.
Well, thank you. I think you hit them all. Gardening is the big one right now,
Right?
as you know, because Lisa and I talk about gardening.
As you know, I mean,
constantly.
you recommended the jalapeno plant, which you
Oh,
can see
yes.
is on my
Being
pizza right now. So
it has been launched. It has been rolled out
launched,
onto your
so as I was just saying there in that brief introduction, every time we're together, you and I have these conversations about because we've both started over basically several times professionally. Can you maybe talk a little bit about your history with that and your process?
Yeah. So I started studying music when I was like in the second grade. So I played the piano and I was pretty good at it. I started singing in high school, and I knew from like the seventh grade on I wanted to study music, but I wasn't sure what I was going to study. So by the time I ran off to college, where I was roommates with Lisa, it was okay, I'm going to be a double major in music and theater. And when I got there, it quickly became I'm going to major in music and I want to be an opera singer because I saw live opera performed in front of me for the first time.
I was going to
And it
say,
was
why
just like
opera?
live opera. There's nothing like listening to a real trained opera singer in person, up close and personal. And it was like a Wednesday afternoon master class, and their juniors and seniors got up and sang, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. That is amazing. So I wanted to be an opera singer, and I had a lot of skill and a lot of talent, but I had a lot of vocal problems. So I finished up my degree, and I went on to get my master's degree in music here in Arkansas. So I came here to study, and I finished up my master's, and I knew that my voice wasn't ready to try to launch myself. And I very unwisely borrowed way too much money for my master's program. So just you really had no notion of what I was doing to my future as a singer. So my first piece of advice for young singers is to not get themselves into debt. Because I couldn't afford to just pack up everything, put it into, a storage unit and go and try to make my way. Which I talked to somebody fairly recently who was a mentor of mine, and he was like, I always expected you just to get out there and do it. But I didn't, because I didn't have the money. And I also acquired several cats and dogs.
I lived that itinerant life as a radio talent for a good number of years. There was a time when everything I owned fit into a 95 Geo Metro, and I was bouncing around. So that's a tough life. And I don't blame anybody for wanting to pass that by.
And I was never a person who wanted to live on ramen noodles and, whatever. And so here I was in Arkansas, and I was working at Barnes and Noble booksellers, and I met my husband, which is a totally different story. Ladies, let me tell you about the kind of man you should look for.
If you want to share that, go ahead.
That's a totally different podcast.
Okay.
I have a whole string of advice that starts with give the nice guys a chance. He was totally not my type. I wanted somebody artistic who had like a music degree or an art degree. And I met this guy who was painting lines on the street. And I was just like, he looks nice.
Cool.
And that was the start of that. And we're going to celebrate 20 years in August.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. But so I'm working at the bookstore. I eventually started teaching voice full time. I wasn't making very much money at all because so this was 1999, 2000, and I was charging like $20, $25 an hour. It was a small studio. I kind of got recruited, which is how I really started teaching, because I was teaching before that on a smaller scale. But I finally left the bookstore. I started teaching voice. And it was really good, but I was frustrated because I didn't have the performing opportunities that my students had. And I was just like, I'm tired of not being able to perform. I miss it. So I finally, with discussion of my boyfriend, who eventually became my fiance, and then my husband, decided to go back to school and get my doctorate and go more into teaching and, just kind of change, just thinking about that. But I was still just really kind of focused in on being a performer. But what I realized over the course of many years, and it was a slow realization, was that I didn't love performing the way that I used to. So when I was a teenager and when I was a young college student, like, performing was everything. And I loved being in rehearsal and I just lived for it. And after I started dating Brian and I was doing a production of Cabaret, I played Fräulein Schneider.
I was going to ask who.
I sing about the pineapple and yeah. And I was just like, I thought it must be because it's just like a local theater group. And, after you've finished your master's and you've done several operas programs during the summertime and you sing with these really amazing singers, it's just kind of frustrating. It's like, how many times do we have to run over this song because I learned it like the second time through, kind of a thing. But it was, I was like, okay. And so we went off to college, and the first semester I was there, I was by myself. Brian moved up the next semester. And I told my teacher, I was just like, I was in an opera. I auditioned, I got a part. And I was like, I'm just not enjoying it the way that I used to. And she's like, Kierstin, you grew up. Your priorities changed. And I was just like, okay.
Funny how that happens.
It really is. And I started really directing for the first time, and I really was enjoying it. So, I finished up school, most of school. There's so many pieces to getting your doctorate, I swear to God. We moved back to Arkansas in 2004, and I started looking for a teaching job, really, really looking, putting out applications. And that was literally right after the job market really started to tighten up in education. What they never tell you when you're getting your doctorate is how many people are out there with doctorates who are waiting tables, or they're working at the bank, or they're somebody's receptionist or admin. Nobody's a secretary anymore. That's not like cool language anymore. So it just had gotten worse. And so I was having trouble finding a job. So I was like, well, let's go back to Arkansas, because Brian's mom was here and she was disabled. And so I was like, she really needs to have us close by. And he was like, that's great. Wonderful. He got his job back where he was working before. So he was in something that he really enjoyed for a long time. And I, ended up, I worked part-time adjunct for a couple of different schools. I was teaching privately. I was conducting some choirs, and I ended up working at Walmart home office. And I ran into an old opera singing friend who was phenomenally talented. She never had the vocal issues that I had had, which by the time I was done with my doctorate, by the way, the vocal issues were taken care of. But also I was significantly older, and we didn't have any money for me to try to do anything like that. So I was like, okay, it's not that big of a deal anymore. Like, whatever, but, I was working as a buyer's assistant for the fresh beef buyer at Walmart. And while I have a plucky optimism that allows me to see the best in a situation, it still wasn't really what I had envisioned.
I like that term, plucky optimism.
Yes. It has, it's probably one of my better qualities when it comes to working with me. That doesn't mean if you live with me, you're going to see it all the time. But if you work with me, you probably won't see my grouchy, cranky, bitchy side. Kevin will probably see it at some point, and Lisa has certainly seen it. But the people I work with don't generally see that. I just don't. So anyway, working for Walmart, fresh beef buyer. And this is the first time I have this knowledge that there's a whole field of people who are getting paid to teach practical things, like what buttons to push in a computer program to enter in numbers to order t-shirts for Walmart or whatever. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I started kind of getting interested in that, thinking about it, putting out some feelers. And that was when I first discovered the field of instructional design. Well, meanwhile, this friend that I'd run into, we were doing some singing together, and I was kind of conducting and leading the group. And she was like, why aren't you teaching? You're clearly a teacher. And I was like, find me a job and I'll apply for it. And so she totally did. And so I went to teach at a community college. And I loved it because I got to do a little bit of everything. What I had discovered is that I don't really like teaching voice lessons all day. Teaching voice lessons is exhausting physically and mentally, and I don't want to do it full time. Working at a community college, though, I was able to teach voice lessons, and I directed choirs, and I taught music theory and sight singing, in-ear training, music appreciation, which I still do. And
by the way, you're the amazing choir that you grew there. All those performances are still out there on YouTube, right?
Yeah, they are. It's a community choir, but this or a community college, and there was just no program. Mm-hmm. And I built it up, and it was amazing and wonderful, and the kids were fantastic. And I posted on Facebook like last week that like one of our concerts, we did the Vivaldi Gloria with orchestra, and I was able to get like the money to pay for the orchestra. And they were such a small choir, and they sounded amazing. And it was just a really wonderful experience for them. And I started really doing some more scenes directing, and it was just a fantastic time. Had a couple of rocky years to start because I'm such a plucky, optimistic person. I can also be a little bit of a pushover when it comes to high school kids. And these are practically high school kids, community college. Some of them are a little bit older. So I really had to learn over the course of several years to just not put up with any crap. And really settled in, and I got a really good group of kids. We had about 3 years where it was exceptional and people were amazed. And then somehow the powers that be decided to shut down the music program. And it broke my heart. I was finally settling in. I realized how wonderful it was to be a teacher. I realized that I had always naturally tended to teach people things. And so I got back into performing, and this time it was as an adult who really enjoyed singing, but didn't need to be like the star of the show anymore. Like I was like, I don't care. I'll play this small role. The last thing that I did professionally was sing with the Heartland Opera Theater. We did La Traviata, and it was a role that I'd sung like 20 years before, like exactly 20 years. And it was wonderful. And I was like, my voice worked beautifully. And, I was working with other professionals, and I felt great. And I was also sort of mentoring a young singer who was in the chorus. And so that was a really good feeling. And I just have so much pride in the students that I taught while I was there. So when I left, I was just shattered. I was a hot mess. I was really depressed. I didn't know what to do. And so I started looking for a job and didn't get any interviews. Apparently they didn't think that like 7 years at a community college equaled a single year in, higher education, a 4-year school.
Yeah, preach.
Yeah. It's just like, are you kidding me? I did all the things that you need to do, but I didn't have students that won competitions. I was like, when I interviewed for that job, I was like, I don't want to turn out a bunch of opera singers. I want to help people grow up into decent adults with some music in their lives. And that's all. And so they hired me, which was, and I still keep in touch with a lot of my students. And I mean, I had one guy who was I want to call him an exchange student because he was just an international student, but
Mhm.
he called me mom.
Aw.
Yeah, he didn't have a mother, and he was, I don't remember what country he was from. Sweet, sweet guy. And he would call me mom, which was really sweet. I mean, I literally have a mom necklace in the bathroom that one of my students gave me. I have one student, she's in college now. I started teaching her when she was 7. She sang with my choir when she was like 13 years old. I was like, you know what? She's going to come sing with us. So I've just really good experiences, and I was really devastated. And we couldn't, I was applying all over the United States. And, we're like, okay, we're going to move, and maybe we're going to sell the house. Maybe we're going to rent it. I don't know. And I remember I applied for another community college, like out in Washington State, and I think they were interested. But I realized I had no interest in trying to do the same thing over again. I didn't want to build up another program from scratch, go through all the same issues. It was in a really small town. I wasn't going to have access to professional musicians, which is what I did when I was up in Neosho. I was very close to Joplin and the university up there. So I was like, you know what? I'm just, nope, not interested. Started looking closer to home, looking at some different things. And I finally was just like, I don't want to move. I don't want to move. I love my town. I love my life. I love my house. I'm an Army brat. And so having lived now the majority of my life in Arkansas, I was just really starting to realize how connected I was to my community here. I was like, no, I don't want to leave. And I posted on Facebook that I was like, you know what? I'm sticking around. So I ended up teaching at the high school voice lessons for like a semester. And then unfortunately, the principal decided, there was 3 of us that were teaching voice lessons there. The principal decided that that was not going to be allowed, which is a shame because it was a really, really good program for the students and for the choral program. Because it's Bentonville High School. They have one of the best choral programs in the state, if not the best. Their chamber choir is second to none. Like they would knock the socks off of any college choir. Seriously awesome. And it was really, really fun. But it was like, okay, sorry, you can't do that anymore. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? So I went home for a visit to my parents, and I told Brian, by this time, Brian had reinvented himself. That's a different conversation.
Right.
He's now a massage therapist. He was working in Walmart and Sam's Club corporate for a good portion. And he went to school for the first time, and he's a massage therapist. So he started working for an actual spa. And I was like, okay, fine. We'll go back to, the dark place and get an office job. I was like, oh, I hate my life.
Oh, that is so good. Yeah. That moment when you just have to accept that, oh, God, this ain't working. I got to get a real job.
Yeah, it's pretty much
that moment can kill you.
Yeah, it really can. And it was very frustrating, and it was a hard time. Now, I was in the middle of trying to get an opera company off of the ground.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I was doing decently at it, but we also ended up losing a lot of money, and because people talk a big talk. Oh, we lost a lot of money.
Well, I remember. I remember you asked me to do the promos for it, and I did.
Yeah, you did.
And I was like,
yeah, you did, and they were fantastic.
Is there any money in this? Like, no, but it'll air on the local PBS station.
And it did.
Oh boy! All right, I'm on PBS. Woohoo!
Right. I forgot about that. Yeah, no. We had 3 really, really good productions. One with the full orchestra. Right. We had a gala with a volunteer orchestra and high school students. So it was like teaching and directing. And I will just say, I'm a really fantastic stage director, especially when it comes to musical theater and opera. I really, really wanted to do that. But we couldn't get anyone interested in donating their money. You can get singers to sing for nearly nothing. You cannot get orchestra players to play for nothing. They expect to be paid, and they expect to be paid well. We have 2 professional orchestras here. I was able to put an orchestra together, and that's where all the money went. And it really put us in a tight spot. But at least while I was working this job, I was just like, okay, I'm trying to do an opera company. That was kind of feeding my creative side. But I was also just like, I was in a job as a project manager. I'd gotten recruited. She was like, oh yeah, you've done this for years, And I was just like, I don't even know what a project manager is, but okay. the money was really good. I was like, this is a temp job. It was a little over $19 an hour as a temp for Walmart. I was shocked. So I was like, okay, well, it led to working for a really great program manager who was very complimentary of, he was like, you have a good instinct for this. And I was like, well, thank you. It's not what I want to do the rest of my life, but okay. But what I noticed while I was there is that I had they had no onboarding for the position. So onboarding is getting trained to do your job. Right. And it was really frustrating. And what I had done years and years before at Walmart was I had developed training materials for my job because I wanted everything written down in sequence and so I was just like, this is kind of frustrating. I started looking for jobs because I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And it's a temp job anyway. And I started to see instructional design jobs and I was getting some interviews. And so I shifted gears. I was like, this was something I had kind of thought about years ago. I'm a natural teacher. I've trained people before to do things. So I was like, this will be a really interesting place to take my skill set. And I did apply for several jobs, which no longer exist, by the way. God is so good to me. He was like, no, you're not going to get this job. So I told Brian, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do instructional design, I'm going to get all the schooling that I need. And so I got a job at the University of Arkansas and I went back to school, which gave me a whole new appreciation of people who work and go to school because I'd never done that before. I was like, I wanted to apologize to all my students who were working and taking my online classes. So I got an online degree in instructional educational technology. And I graduated in 2018. And I actually got a job as a contractor before I graduated. So I left the university. And I started working as an instructional designer. And I discovered that the creativity that had served me so well as an opera director and the passion for making people's work lives easier. And I like to help people. I like to guide people. Like, I want people to be like, oh, Kierstin, you helped me learn this thing and it's changed my life. Like, all of those combined make me a really good instructional designer. And so that, in a nutshell, is how I went from wanting to be an opera singer to being really, really grateful that I'm not an opera singer anymore. I actually quit teaching last year permanently. As Kevin knows, I had breast cancer last year. Mm-hmm. And so I was teaching a handful of students privately. And when I got my diagnosis, I was like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. And I just gave away my piano like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've had the piano for almost 30 years. I bought it when I was really young and it's an antique, but I have something better. I got my mom's cabinet. But yeah, what I discovered, so personal discoveries that I discovered, what I really loved about performing was being social. I mean, I'm good at performing and I love it. And I love singing in choirs, especially. I love stage directing. I think it's fun and interesting, but I also like to be at home and not doing all of those things. I like my private time. And people are like, I'm an introverted extrovert. I was like, what's that? Okay, it's kind of me. I guess I am kind of. I like to recharge. I can be really bubbly and fun, but I like to recharge. But I really, very, very recently, I was like, that's what it was all those years. It was being around people who got me. It's just when you're a creative person, especially when you're in high school and they're all jerks. And Lisa and I actually went to a really great high school. We had really great people. I had my fair share of, people who were jerks to me, but overall it was a great high school experience. But at the end of the day, when you're a creative person and you're talented, and then you're among other creative, talented people, and they understand you and your idiosyncrasies, and they talk your language and they respect your abilities, that's what I like. My love language is words of affirmation. I like people to say thank you. I like people to tell me that I'm good at something, that my work is really good, that I made a difference in their lives. That's what I like. So I was like, okay, interesting. And I also realized that when I stopped being so busy all of the time, because remember, I was in college pretty much for like 10, 15 years, I swear. 2 years and 4, and then 2 more, 6, 8. I was probably in college for like 9 years, 9 or 10 years or something. And so when you're in college, I mean,
Yeah,
all the homework,
I
all the
had the
homework.
experience of basically being old enough to be everyone's dad or granddad, including
Yeah,
most of the teachers.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And so I spent so much time outside of class because I got my doctorate. So I had tons of rehearsal for recitals I had to give. And I wrote a like 264-page monstrosity of research, which I haven't thrown it away. I still have it. It's still in my office. Um, and then I, as a teacher at Crowder, the extra time you put in as a teacher is insane, especially if you're teaching the arts. The nights and weekends of rehearsals. I mean, there was never a night that I wasn't sitting in front of the television with my computer in my lap, arranging music, grading papers, doing lesson plans. And I was gone a lot. So I go from getting my degree and being gone all the time because I was in rehearsal and I had choir jobs and just all the, and being busy with that. And then, being a teacher and doing that, and then going back to school. And so working and then studying all the time and writing papers and doing projects. And then I got out of school and I had like 2 jobs for a while. I was working at Walmart as a temp again, this time as an instructional designer.
In the
Being
office,
hired,
not in the store.
Yeah, no, home office. I'm at Walmart. I'm working as an instructional designer. For a whole different conversation, I decided I wanted to get into corporate design instead of academic design, which was the right decision. And it was really nice. I was really enjoying the work. It was gratifying to be around people who appreciate my creativity. There's a running theme there. And being around a bunch of creative people. And we had 2 supervisors, and how they got like 30 plus people on a team to gel and not kill each other is a miracle. They were really, really good at it. But I was still working a part-time temp job for another company, for Franklin Covey. I was finishing up. And so I would come home from work and then I would work some more. And so all of that wound down. And now I've got 1 job. My mother had just died in February of 2019. And so by about August of 2019, I was just about ready to let go of the opera company because I was like, I had a singer drop out and I was just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm losing money again. I would like to stay married because Brian was really not happy about the money we were losing. And so I was like, it was like somewhere in August, October, September in there. I was just like, you know what? I'm done. And the feeling of relief when I said, that's it, I was just like, okay, that's a sign. Clearly I was just kind of holding on, hoping for, and I was like, nope. And I settled in, and all of a sudden I had all this free time. And I realized that at this point in my life, I want to go to work and do something I enjoy. And then I want to come home and not work. So when I say that,
and grow things, grow pretty
and
things.
grow things. Yes, I'm an obsessive gardener now. I've always loved gardening. I never had the time for it. You have to put in so much time to keep the stuff alive. And I realized very much what I love about nurturing students. I love about nurturing my plants. And if I don't succeed somewhere, it's not a tragedy. I didn't ruin anyone's life. And so I can pull it out. It's like, toss it. I told my neighbor yesterday, she was like, what should I do with this garden space? I was like, dig it all up, because it was just all overgrown. I was like, dig it up, throw it out, start over. She was like, okay. I walked over there today. She had dig it all out and it looked fantastic. I was just like, oh, she did what I said. So yeah, now I'll just offer my free advice to people at the garden center. Like, hey, you should buy Proven Winners plants, and here's how you do these. Yeah. So yeah, I took this job with the hope that it would turn into something different, which it's in the process of doing. So I was working at Walmart home office, and we were doing projects on like a 2 to 4 week basis. So we would only get to do part of the project, and we'd hand it off to another team, and they would take it further, and another team. And so you never really got to do the whole thing. I had one project I actually got to do, which was really fun. I designed a class for data governance, which sounds so not interesting, but dang it, it was awesome. I designed a board game, and we got the board game made with little I just connected with the right people. Again, full of creative people, the learning part of Walmart. And I really, really enjoyed it, but I was tired of onboarding every 2 to 4 weeks a brand new project. I was like, I want to work on something where I know what I'm doing and I'm not going, constantly, because Walmart, a lot of stuff that you do is for stores and store operations. If you've never worked in a store, you have no idea. You could come up with what you think is a really fantastic idea, and they're like, yeah, no, and here's all the reasons that won't work, because you don't have any basis to base that on. So I was like, nah. So I started looking for a new job because I needed something that wasn't temporary. And I literally found this job at the university at the last possible second. I looked at it and I was like, oh, hey, this looks interesting. And the pay is really, really good. And I was like, I'm qualified for this. It's got training. I could tell that it wasn't going to be instructional design the way I was doing, but I was like, it might go someplace else. And I'll become my own SME, which is a subject matter expert. I will be expected to learn software to the point where I can train people in using it, which is what I do now. And so I was like, oh, I should apply for this. And so a couple nights later, I'm laying in bed. I was like, I should get out my iPad and look and see when the job closes. And it was literally like in 15 minutes. It was like almost midnight. And I was like, shit. And I literally just leapt out of bed and slid down the hallway into my desk chair and popped open my laptop and just madly started typing. And I applied for the 2 positions, and I got one of them. And so then COVID happened. Everyone goes home. I started working there in February 2020. I went home a month and a half later, and I was home for over a year, especially because I was out on medical leave. In that time, the job changed several times, and now I actually have a team of 2 designers that I am in charge of. And so I'm learning how to actually be somebody's boss, which is way different from being somebody's teacher. There's less bossiness, I feel like, in being somebody's supervisor or boss than there is in being somebody's teacher. So I do that. We have a new talent development director, and she's from the corporate world. And I can see what an impact our whole team is going to have on the university over the long haul. It's a really exciting time to be on. So like when I was at Walmart, I was one team of like 30 among hundreds and hundreds of people handling this giant corporation's learning. And it was so big and unwieldy. And it was just like, ugh. But here I am at what is a big university, relatively speaking. But we've got a team right now of like 5. There's my boss, and there's me, and there's the 2 people who work for me, and then there's one other person that works for my boss doing a slightly different thing. That's it. She's going to be hiring some more people, but we are trying to do a major change. Training is always the last thing that people want to spend money and time on, but it really is the most important thing. And it's not just training, it's employee development. So I get to feel good about myself. I get to go to work. My work is valued. I work in corporate design at a university because I'm working on the back end. I'm not working with faculty on how to teach their classes or whatever. I'm working on the other side with software. So it's fulfilling, and it's easy to leave at work when I come home.
It almost sounds like this has all been a natural progression with you. Like
it really
one
has.
thing has, logically led into another. But I mean, so that's fortunate. I mean, as you know, my own journey wasn't quite that smooth, but I definitely talk about that, or I definitely understand. So, I think what would you say if you had a checklist to give somebody who wanted to reinvent themselves, maybe had hit a dead end in life, or like me when years ago, long before I met Lisa, I was working in the local radio industry, was doing traffic reports, was going to work twice a day, working 7 days a week, in a very, very poor relationship at home. And I got to a place where I'm like, yeah, this is killing me. I got to quit this, or I got to do something else, or I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And eventually, that led to my heart condition, that led to having heart surgery. But that, that's what got me with my wife, Lisa. And I had to do something just completely different to get my head straight. And I actually went to work at Home Depot for 3 years.
That's exactly. I was literally going to be like, if you need to get out of a situation, get out of it.
Yeah.
If you're in a toxic work environment, what I realized when I left the community college I was at was that I was in a toxic environment with my colleagues. My students were amazing.
Right.
The people that I worked with, unfortunately, were not.
And my history with, I'm sorry. Go.
Yeah, and absolutely, I know.
My history with poor choice of business partners.
Exactly. And leaving there, and another teacher was basically got the boot at the same time I left, like right before me. And I told him later, I was like, I had no idea how toxic and unhealthy that was until I left. I'm sitting at home and I'm depressed and bored, but I felt tons better. It's like, you need to work where people appreciate your work, even if you are doing something completely different than when you started, because it's a truism, because it's true. You can work at something that's not that exciting, but if you have a good team, people who value your input and treat you with respect, that goes a long way. You can have a job that you love with people that are evil. And I've been in some situations, and I learned, I finally got to the point where I had to go to HR in one of the jobs I was working at. And I wish that I could go back and tell myself, 15 years ago, or however long it was when I started teaching, and had, a teacher that was constantly getting in my face and undermining me when I spoke to people like, oh no, wait it out. You're going to be here and that person's going to retire. And no, that's not how it worked out. And so I'm like, no, I will not let people treat me like that anymore. If I've done my job and I'm doing a good job, one of the reasons I do corporate design instead of academic design is because on the corporate side, they really almost universally appreciate what you're doing. They're like, I have the subject matter knowledge, subject matter expertise. You know how to put the training together. I'm so glad you're here. Kierstin, you're awesome. Thank you. It's really, really hard for teachers of any kind to understand what instructional design is and why they should let this person come and tell them how to, I'm doing air quotes, how to teach my class. I get it. I totally get it. It's weird, and it's, they don't really understand what an instructional designer is supposed to do. Like, oh, well, I'll just video my lectures and put them online. I'm like, no, that's not actually instructional design.
Yeah, I've struggled to stay awake through a number of those in school over the years. Here's one of my favorite ones. Okay, this was back during my second stint at community college. I don't even remember what. I think it was maybe technical writing, and from the sound that the professor had clearly done the recording in his kitchen. And about halfway through, it becomes obvious that it's dinner time for Kitty. And you just hear, and then he's like, he doesn't even pause the recording. He says, "Oh, I'll be right back." And in the background, you can hear the box of the bag of food and the scoop, and You can even hear it hitting the bowl, and he
Mhm.
feeds Kitty, and then he comes back and goes, "Okay, now where were we? Oh,
I've had a
okay.
couple of
Here's
those.
how you construct this
Yeah,
sentence." And
yeah. No, it's
so
so much more than that. And I, like I said, I took this job on a gut instinct that maybe I would get to do something fun in a few years. And we're finally kind of getting into that. I've got more of a leadership position or whatever. But yeah, I don't know if I've thought about this a lot lately. If I could go back and do it all differently, let me tell you, I like making good money. I like having extra money to do things. I mean, we're stuck with 2 car payments now, which we didn't plan on. But you know what? We're settling in. I'm saving for retirement. I'm actually planning on retiring when I turn 65, if not sooner. We just started saving for retirement like 2 years ago. So yeah, we're kind of late to the game there. But I don't know. I feel like what leads me to be good at what I do now is the sum of my experiences as a teacher and as a creative person. So, you know, I kind of wish I had figured out that I could be really happy doing essentially a desk job in something that doesn't seem creative on the surface, but is pretty creative. And I still teach an online class. You've heard me teach
I
my
have.
students before. So it was like 2017. I was listening to Glenn Beck and I heard an advertisement for Freedom Project Academy online homeschooling. And I was like, that sounds interesting. We should check that out. Because I thought for about a half second, wouldn't it be cool to do online homeschooling and like start my own business or something? And then I realized I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I can barely keep an opera company afloat. I was like, maybe not. I thought maybe I'll reach out to this school and I'll communicate with them. So I sent them a letter and some links to my YouTube videos because I have music appreciation videos on YouTube. And like 6 months later, they called me and they were like, "Hey, are you still interested?" And I said, "Yeah." They're like, "Okay, we'd love to hire you." Okay, cool.
So
So I started teaching at that school. It was a lot of work and it doesn't pay a ton, but it keeps my hand in. I get to share music with a nice crop of students. I'm allowed to push them. I'm expected to push them. I'm given a lot of autonomy over my class, but of course, I also respect the principal and the parents. But he's like, I'm not here to tell you how to teach your class. And one of the things I was running into as a music teacher in Missouri was that the state kept pushing down these requirements that were just like, what you can't micromanage everything I do in a music class. You have to be like in the moment and you need to be able to pivot. And when you're teaching music theory, sometimes you end up trying 3 different ways until they finally figure out, the key signatures or the chord progressions or whatever. You can't micromanage that. And I think you can talk to a lot of teachers now and they learn how to teach and then they go into a school and they're handed lesson plans and told to teach them. Nobody wants to do that. And it sucks in music. And so it's like, they're like, no, you figure it out. How do you want to teach? And, obviously they wanted me to teach music and it was a challenge because it's music theory and appreciation. But I was like, oh, there's so many possibilities here. Now I do it every other year because it's a lot of work. And I was trying to see if the enrollment would be bigger if we did it every other year, which I think it kind of is. We're just getting going on this version of the class where people can get online and do it at their own pace. I have no idea how that's going to go because the fun part is interacting with the students. And then the 20, so it was the 2019-2021 class. 2020-2021 class. Okay, you get the idea. Last year's class, they graduated last year or they finished up last year. A lot of them didn't want to quit the class. They were having too much fun. So we started meeting like every couple of weeks. And I now have 2 guys. One's a high schooler who's probably going to take over the world. He's brilliant. And he's like 16. And then a film composer that I brought in as a guest who's I call him one of my students, even though he's never studied with me, but he's one of my kids. And
Is
he is
it the one I'm
brilliant.
thinking of?
Yes, this is
Okay.
Alex.
Okay. Yeah.
And I brought him in to do like just like a really cool podcast interview with the students, which I still need to just give you all that material and tell you to go make it into a good edited, because it was really fantastic. He was really impressed with how much the students had learned. I was like, yes, I teach them a lot more than they would learn in a normal music theory or music appreciation class. So now the three of us, we get together pretty much twice a month, and we just talk about music and share stuff. And we just kind of were hanging on for a while, just like we're all stuck at home, but we can at least talk on the computer.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a really great time, and it's those little things. So I would suggest, like, person who's got, they're in a horrible situation, get out of it. Get out of it. Go find something else in a safe environment, and just get yourself out of that and let your spirit heal. Um, you know, and figure out, what can I do for 40 hours a week and not want to jump off a bridge? Seriously, what can I do? I mean, people need to understand, and I think Mike Rowe really talks about this a lot. You don't have to confuse your passion with your career. I'm passionate about music. I still am. I love sharing music. I still enjoy teaching it, but now I teach one high school class every other year, and I have a music club. You know? And by the I had an interesting conversation with my biological mother, who is a therapist, that there was a few years there where I didn't want to listen to classical music and opera. I felt weird about having music decorations in my office. She was like, "You were like going through the stages of grieving." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I was." But you don't have to have a job that is like the pinnacle of your passion. You can have a hobby for that. You can go to a job, and you can spend, because you're going to spend 8 hours a day with people, and find people that you like working with, something that's you're good at. I mean, do find something that you're good at. But then come home and spend time with your family.
Man, I wanted to get your input on one thing that was, as part of my process, was something that darn near killed me.
Yeah.
I would say, if I would give all of the above advice, and I would add one other thing. I would say, just be careful whom you approach for advice. I would even simplify that further. I would say, avoid gurus like the
Yeah.
plague. Because, I got to a point, I moved on from the retail job to another retail job, to where I was just traveling the country, actually working for as a third party vendor rep in Walmart stores.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
yeah, I had gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, at least I'm doing a job that doesn't suck, and I'm doing it by myself, and nobody's bugging me. And then I'm like, it's still not enough. And so I went back to, because, I started I actually started the whole online broadcasting thing back in 2003, 2004.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And I had left that company, and I went back to the people that, some of whom I had recruited and nurtured back in the day, and went to them and said, okay, you're still doing this sports broadcasting thing, and I want to make commercials again. So I started doing that on the side, and then I got frustrated because they didn't want to pay me. Like,
Yeah.
what? No. You think I need to make money at this.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point then where I decided, you know what, I want to try something completely different. I think I want to see if I can make it as a voiceover artist. Maybe
Yes.
at some point down the road, voice a cartoon character, or
Right?
do national commercials,
Yeah.
or things like that, other than, just reciting the daily specials at Joe's Ice House in Cuero or wherever,
Yeah.
So, and I went online, I went on Google, and I said, I typed, how to become a voiceover artist. And the next thing you know, I have fallen into somebody's sales funnel. So it kind of goes like this, like, okay, join my Facebook group. I have a professional Facebook group. Oh, here's the free ebook that I wrote. Oh, and here's all the people I know, and this, that, and the other thing. And next thing you know, that was I will say a sub 5-digit mistake, but not too far under it.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm surprised I'm still married after blowing all that money. But yeah, you said you kind of went through the same thing with Brian.
Yeah.
And
different. Yeah. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
People who truly have a nurturing and a mentoring heart are going to give you advice for free.
Okay.
I mean, that's just it. I mean, somebody can come to me and be like, oh, hey, I want advice on teaching music or being an instructional designer or gardening. And I'm going to happily share all of those things. Now, maybe on my schedule and my time, because, I don't have all the free time. Well, I do have free time and I'd like to keep it free. But I mean, I have an intern that's just finishing up at the school. It was my idea. I was like, hey, this will be cool. I'll bring in an ed tech intern and I'll teach him a few things about what it's actually like to do instructional design on the job, not in school. I've told students this before. It's like, what you want to do? I had a girl who wanted to be a book editor, and I was like, fine, go find, or like a magazine editor. I was like, go find one, start emailing them. The good ones are going to want to help you, and they will largely do it for free. Anybody who wants to charge you money to give you advice, tell them to kiss your hiney and walk on. Because people who really have like a mentoring, teaching heart will do it for you.
Well, see, in the voiceover world, what I encountered was, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've earned all this knowledge. I shouldn't give it away for free. And by the way, I know people at the union, and if you don't train with me, you'll never get in. So,
right.
Stuff like that. So just definitely avoid things like that. And personally, I've taught and trained and helped people get started in sports broadcasting, and there's two individuals in an organization that I helped get podcasts started. And there was a time when that would tick me off, because you train someone and then they go out and start a competing business, or they go on to bigger and better things and kind of leave you behind. But what I found that you have to do is you have to take pride in the fact that you enabled somebody else's success.
That's so true.
Their success is yours, and whatever they decided to do with it is no reflection on you.
Yeah.
And even if they don't,
you need to define what success is for you.
Right.
If success is for you earning money, then you did something dumb. But if success for you, seriously, if you're like, I want to earn money and I'm going to give people free advice, sorry, that wasn't the smartest thing. But if you're like, I want to help people and I want to feel good about myself and maybe give some people a leg up, and then I mean, I literally just had this conversation with somebody last week. We're working on some evaluation analysis, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, blah, 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 success. I was like, whoa, what's your measure of success? You're just throwing that word around. It means different things to different people. And I remember reading, it was a fantasy novel, because, I like to read sci-fi and fantasy. And it was, like somebody who's sitting on the street corner playing her violin. And when she stopped looking for the money in the hat and started looking for the smiles, like the music came more naturally and she had a better experience, and she actually ended up making more money. And it was just like, oh yeah. So how do you define success? I mean, if you go to somebody and you're like, I like what you do, can you give me any tips? And they say, if you pay me, then you say, I'm sorry, I just, that's not what I'm interested in. Thanks though. You're awesome. And walk on. Now, there's tons. Yeah. There's tons of, I follow one guy on Facebook. He's a audiobook narrator. That man hustles to keep his audience. He knows that he's like, you did that one audiobook where he's making a percentage. And you talking about that and me thinking about that one particular guy that I follow on Facebook. All the things that I learned from watching people do it. So it's like, you can just be like, okay, there are thousands of videos on YouTube with people showing you how to do just the basic mechanics of voiceover. what's good equipment. They do equipment reviews.
Yes.
It's like I set up, it was in a closet. I literally got into a quasi argument with my boss today because she was like, we should be doing that recording work here instead of over in that recording studio. And I was like, do you understand how noisy it is trying to record anything either in our homes or at the office? Because every time I turn on something to record, they start doing the leaf blower outside or mowing or kids racing up and down, birds chirping, dogs snoring, cats purring, I mean, it was comical at one point. I was just like, I give up. They're just going to have to listen to my dog snoring. Anyway, getting back to that, the things that I've learned from watching people do stuff, making mistakes, figuring it out. I feel like you're the same way. Everybody doesn't learn that way.
Well, obviously. I am now. I paid the price and learned my lesson. I paid a very expensive price to learn that lesson. Now, I will tell you that the exception I've made is that just, I've been working, I've had some pretty major clients because the whole thing kind of segued into live stream production for me.
Yeah.
And that comes from doing sports broadcasts where I'm engineering everything myself.
Yeah.
And
I just got a vision of you doing like a broadcast where they're like getting ready to do communion and you're just like, oh, the priest is handling the Eucharist, and here comes
no. Actually,
and
I actually broadcast the diocesan chrism and then diaconate ordination masses, the major masses here, and there was two men from a Catholic radio station over in Bryan College Station, over in Aggie Land.
Yeah,
and they were sitting at the table right next to me, and they were watching my video feed, and they were calling play-by-play on it. And they were doing that.
That's so funny. Yeah. Well, and
you can do play-by-play on anything.
This is true. You took COVID was horrible, but also a huge opportunity for people who were willing to find new ways to work or just wouldn't quit working.
Right.
My sister is a social worker now, basically. She doesn't have a degree in social work. She never quit her job. She would go to work and she'd have panic attacks every day. She was terrified, but she was like, I can't afford to quit. I need to keep my job. And she really believed in what she was doing. And she's got a job now that is, so much better suited for her. And because she didn't quit. My niece, who's like 22 years old, she's working, last time I heard, she'd gone from being a server at a restaurant to making $50,000 a year at a nursing home in the space of about 3 years because she didn't quit. She kept working. We're in a place right now where the employee has the power. And so you pivoted and you were just like, oh, hey, I'm going to step up. And you discovered that you have the right spirit for this work because
I still make commercials, but I discovered trying to be a big time voiceover guy. You mentioned hustling earlier. I did not want to work that hard.
Same here.
A lot of the people I used to follow, they're at it 24/7, and they can't even go on vacation without taking a microphone with them.
Yeah.
They're going to go build a blanket fort in the closet because they can't they can't afford to walk away from a job, to pass up any job. It's like, no wonder they're out there on Facebook forming groups trying to rip off noobs.
Right.
Because they need the money that bad.
Yeah. And it's, it really is. It's just, what do I want to do with my life? And it's like, I don't want to work all day and all night and all weekend. And I saw the opportunity, and opportunity to move into live stream video production. Yeah. Because and I'm like, okay, nobody wants to hear me talk. Maybe they want to watch the pretty moving pictures I make. So, plenty of people like to hear me talk. I still think you're a great voice talent, and
thank you.
And I'm really excited about the project that we're working on together.
And there's another thing I would tell people too. This is a no-brainer, but don't be afraid to try new things, because I will tell
Yeah.
you, when you're in business for yourself, like I am, one of my major clients is a local school district. We do high school sports,
Yeah.
and there's just two of us. We tried to recruit some students, and it
Yeah.
was kind of hit or miss. We had a few that stuck with us through the whole thing, but we hope to restart that program in the coming year. But where I'm going with this is, I found myself, I never wanted to be the play-by-play guy.
Yeah.
Going back to 2004, I just always wanted to be the guy behind the controls.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, my partner, who calls the play-by-play for football, Chance, who I hope to have on a future episode here, he's like, yeah, I don't think I can do basketball. Well, I'm like, well, I don't know if I can do it. He's like, well, I picked up volleyball, so it's your turn. So next, and I'm like, at the time, my opinion has changed after calling a season of it. But at the time, I was like, I don't even like basketball. Of course, now I have learned to like it. I have learned to like it now. And then this spring, I'm calling softball games. I'm calling baseball games. And I don't know if I would say I'm good at it. I'm not the worst, and I get better every time. But it's amazing. You will find, with the proper motivation, you can do things you never wanted to, or thought you could, or imagined yourself doing. And one of the biggest motivator for me was it needed to get done, and I couldn't afford to pay anyone else to do it.
Right. That's so true.
So
yeah.
But my whole point is, don't be afraid to go against your own grain and try something new.
Yeah. Well, and you've got the mastermind accountant working behind the scenes.
Yes, I do.
And she's just like, I am not afraid to let Kevin's business grow organically, which is exactly what it's done. It's changed over time. You have modified. And, like, we're not like the superstars, but we're consistent. I heard, I follow a gardening channel religiously.
I've seen this.
And religiously. And they have over 1.5 million subscribers. They've been doing it for about 6 years.
Was this the channel that I looked at and said, "Oh, come on, get another camera," or something?
Yeah, and the thing is that they're
right?
like,
she needs to listen to people like me,
you and I suffer from the need to put forth a perfect product. I suffer from that in instructional design, where I have to be like, I need to get it done. I need to get it done by the deadline. It's not going to be perfect. I don't have time to fiddle with it. It just needs to be done. And I will come back to it in 6 months and play with it some more.
And that's another important thing I've learned is,
I get brain gridlock because I want every video that I post on YouTube to be perfect. And it takes forever. And they're answering questions. People ask them questions about gardening and about this and about that. And they made a comment about YouTube, and they're like, look, there's a lot of YouTube channels out there that you're just like, why does anybody watch this? They're like, but they're consistent. They put out, one video per week on a regular schedule, or every other day, or every third day, or every day, or whatever. You just have to be consistent, and you have to learn who your audience is and just communicate with them. And it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, they'll put in things where once in a while they'll put in like a scene from Young Frankenstein or something. Oh my gosh, it's funny. They've got their own video editor now. They don't do it themselves anymore. They video their own stuff. She's running around with a GoPro because she's gardening. Like, she's like, when my husband has the time to follow me around with one of our 2 really expensive cameras, yes, the video quality is amazing. But we don't have the time to do that all the time because we're working full time as content providers. And so you and I get stuck in this. And I started making a couple of videos at the beginning of COVID, like advice for people teaching online, and they actually get a lot of traffic on YouTube. And it's frustrating for me because I'm like, the videos that I worked on and like did some editing and spent a lot of time on, they are getting really good traffic. But it takes me forever to do that. And by the way, I sit in front of a computer all day doing the same thing. I don't want to come home and do it anymore. And I
Right.
was like, okay, my YouTube career is now over. And I've literally been thinking, I mean, I still have my channel. I've thought about this recently. I'm really big into like taking supplements for some of my medical conditions. And I was like, eventually I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make the video for the supplements I take for ulcerative colitis, which sounds like, oh, innocuous. It's a horrible disease. And I take supplements that I order from Amazon. I'm like, I promise you, if I make that video and it's maybe 5 to 6 minutes long, I'm going to have tons of traffic on something because that is something people are getting online to search for.
So
I'm
basically,
eventually
do
going
what
to
you
make
know.
it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, hey, I have this disease. And the last time I went to the doctor, he literally, like, there was disbelief. He was like, no, I'm sure you were misdiagnosed. And it's like, oh no, I wasn't. Every time I stop taking these supplements that I studied up on, I have one of those horrible flare-ups that you see in the commercials on YouTube. It's a horrible disease, but I take supplements for it, and they work miraculously. And so I'm just like, eventually I'm going to have the discipline to sit down and make a short little video. It's going to be, I'm going to do like a little screen grab of, here's the list of things that I'm going to tell them my story.
You do a little
And I
animation
promise you,
of the pill
yeah,
going through the digestive tract, or
right. Yeah, I've got one really, really good video that I made on how to do breathing for singers, the anatomy of breathing for singers. And I purchased videos from, it might have been Adobe stock videos. It's a really, really good video. But I just discovered that I went and I filmed the second one that I was going to do in a series. And I was like, I look really fat in that video. I never finished it. I was like, oh, I need to re-record it. And I never did. Life got away from me. And I discovered that it wasn't that important. But this couple that have this, they live off of their YouTube video business. They worked nights and weekends. They had full-time jobs. The two of them worked nights and weekends. So what you're doing is equivalent, but you're just doing it in a different area, and you're offering business in a different area. I mean, you and Lisa put in a lot of extra time to get your business to grow, and you're able to do that. And they were able to do that as well. I mean, if you were just trying to live off of your business right now, you would be in the nightmare of hustling and never getting a chance to sit down and take care of yourself, Mister with the heart condition.
and I'm sorry. It's funny you mentioned about that. I was listening to you, but an email just popped into my phone, and we're getting paid. So a client just
Nice.
oh yeah, okay. So
Yeah,
yay,
Lisa said you
the
had
sweet
some
sound of
outstanding
success.
invoices. Yay! Yeah. So yeah, I finally just had to realize that, I don't want to work like that anymore.
And the perfectionism will drive you crazy too. Just like you were just saying, I have another client. There's a spring football league here in town, and my partner Chance and I are doing the games for one of the local teams, the home games. And I mean, we just did this past Saturday night, and I'm looking back at that video, and I'm like, oh God, this is horrible. This is horrible. Oh God, oh, I can't stand this, and yada yada yada, and listen to me stutter, and look at that transition, yada yada. And I get an email from the team owner, and he's like, man, that was amazing. I can't wait till the next game. Here's your money.
Nice.
So you just gotta let that go. You just gotta put the best effort you can out there, and when it's done, it's out there. You can't change it, and move on.
I've been working with the same group of women for several years now. They're like, Kierstin, you can't do perfect. You got to just get it done. I'm like, don't say that. Yeah, it's really hard for me and I'm trying to pass that on to my team. And like, sometimes you just need to do something and get it done. And we can always go back to it later. But right now, and they're just like, oh, no, but you get on these rabbit trails. You're like, I want to fiddle with this image for 4 hours. All of a sudden you're like, where did my day go? I've been messing around trying to find the right picture for this, this slide. Oh my God. You can really get stuck on just wanting everything to look like. Today I was working on, I'm working on my slide deck, getting ready to do a training tomorrow. I think, what I should do in the first slide deck is I should just do a list of all the SMEs that are on the call, because we have some heavy hitters, people that have, high responsibility at the school. People need to understand that, yes, Joe Schmo, otherwise known as Kierstin, is doing your training, but the vice provost is on the call. So I've got people to answer your questions. I was like, cool. So I start writing the names down, and then I start thinking about formatting. And I'm like, maybe I should do a table. And I start to fuss with it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to spend the rest of the day trying to make the first slide look perfect. I was like, stop it. And so I just went through and I was like, bullet point list, bing, bang, boom. I sent the list to the people. They were like, ooh, that's not my correct title. Fix, and I was already working on slide number 2, slide number 3, trying to condense everything. I was just like, I can only do so much. I don't have a month to work on this one presentation. I have today to work on it, and I've got to do it tomorrow, and I've got to be prepared. So that's, I don't like giving things that I don't feel like are just like perfect. I don't, as I've said more than once recently to like the guy who's my intern, and talking about like first draft and second draft and when I was going to school, and they were like, oh, well, go back to your draft and you can just make changes and move words around. And I was like, I don't write crap. My first draft is publishable with very few exceptions. They might find a typo in there. I was like, I don't write.
Like, that's going to be the pull quote for the episode.
Right? I don't write crap.
Crap.
This is my first draft is an A paper. My second draft is an A+. Yeah. So yeah.
Well,
but when it comes to instructional design and deadlines and doing things in iterations, like, okay, we're going to do this first version, and then we're going to do a second version, and then we're going to do a third version. And each time you're going to tighten it up and you're going to see what works and what doesn't. You can't, I had a voice teacher tell me 1,000 years ago, there is no one and only perfect performance. There will always be something you didn't like about it. And she's right. I've had performances where, people were weeping at the beauty of it. And I was like, shoot, I messed up that word. I didn't feel my breath support there. My wig slipped. Whatever. I hardly ever used fake hair when I was on stage. But there's always something. I have made up more French words than I can shake a stick at, because you can make up French and no one's going to know. But I realized, I was like, every performance you're going to do, there's always going to be something that wasn't perfect. The perfect performances happen in a recording studio where you can cut and splice.
Yeah, definitely.
But the thing is that I had to realize what for me, it maybe isn't perfect, is pretty freaking good to everybody else. So it's like, I can get out there and feel like I'm just like, okay, I'll sing a song for you and do this. And I don't feel like I've really rehearsed it. And people are just like in tears and they're amazed. I really had this, I sang for my mother-in-law when she was in hospice, and like my voice was going and I recorded something for her. And I played it for her. Cause I literally was losing my voice. Probably one of the last things she heard me sing. And I thought about how much my mom listened to me sing, and how much people in your lives like to hear your talent and your gift. And I was like, why are we holding this back because we want it to be perfect? They don't care. They think it's amazing. So when you're a creative person, it's important to share your gifts and not be too judgmental on yourself.
And you know what? I think that's the most important point we've made this entire time. And I think that's a great place to leave it. I mean, you and I could literally converse for hours.
Yes,
and
we could be like, blah, 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 blah.
And we should revisit this again, because there's a whole lot more good material here to talk about. But for this time, I want to thank you. Thank you. Sure. You are amazing. You are loved. You are fantastic. and
Oh, thanks.
you've given so much wisdom that my editing process is going to be long and painful, because I'm going to be like,
I
"Oh,
was gonna,
I can't cut that. I can't cut that. That was so good. But I got to cut something." So,
right, all these little nuggets.
oh,
I do
Kierstin.
have something. Yeah, I have something to pass on to you for you to
Okay.
use to your editing brilliance. But yeah, and I am very excited when we're going to come back, hopefully later on this summer, and talk about the project that we're working on together. 'Cause
That sounds wonderful.
that is going to be amazing. Oh, I'm so excited.
All right.
But see, at the end of the day, it's like, learning and new things. And yeah, you're right. We could talk forever. So
Well,
Brian will eventually be home with my whole milk for coffee tomorrow.
You do love your coffee.
I do love my coffee. Yeah, that was so funny. I was like,
And we'll save that story for next time.
Yes.
Kierstin, thank you so much.
I hope people glean good things, and it's life-changing and life-affirming.